welcome to another video. I apologize it's not on the water, but it's going to be thunderstorming this weekend, and I really wanted to record this and not have to wait a long time to get it out. With the last video I did with the 3 things to try with the bow rudder, I got a couple of notes, some emails, and I also saw some back and forth conversation in the comments too about the bow rudder versus the CrossBow Rudder. And I wanted to add to that conversation because I think it's a really great topic to discuss one versus the other. And I don't mean in terms of which is a better stroke. Simply, it's very interesting to hear people's perspective on what they're more comfortable with, which one they learned first, which is kind of where I wanted to go with this discussion. So bow rudder is the one that I was talking about, where you get your blade out in the front somewhere. You can edge your kayak away from the blade, dip the blade all the way in the water, and that way you're able to turn the kayak using the momentum that we already have. You're using the blade to change the direction of the kayak. So the CrossBow Rudder is essentially the same thing, but using the other blade to then do the same thing. We're using the blade to change the direction of the kayak. So the discussion I wanted to have is, first, how, in my opinion, there's no wrong answer. It comes down to preference and what is more comfortable for the paddler, depending on the paddle they use, the boat they use, their flexibility, what they're trying to do. One might be more comfortable than the other. They both will achieve the same thing. They both are safe. They both are reliable. And I wanted to do a short discussion on this because I think sometimes these maneuvers or these moves might seem intimidating to newer paddlers when they're just getting out. And if you see really accomplished kayakers out on the water paddling, a lot of these moves are just ingrained in what they do, and they can pick one of many as they're making their choices, and they are able to link all of these different moves together. And it's awesome to see. For others that might be either just starting their journey or somewhere in the middle, that's where I consider myself to be, I find that sometimes we rely on moves that we learned and are easy to go to. So they're either muscle memory, things we're used to doing, but I find sometimes it simply comes down to what did you learn when? Because I find it very interesting that for me, the bow rudder was one of the first moves I learned. And so that one I spent hours and hours and hours working on, trying to get the right angles, trying to get the right edging of the boat. And so I spent a lot of time. And the first time I encountered the CrossBow Rudder, it was during a forward stroke class where it was more of a party trick at that point, because what we were learning was, as we were working on our rotation, the instructor was having us go into a CrossBow Rudder and then take a stroke. CrossBow Rudder and then take a stroke. CrossBow Rudder and then take a stroke. The idea was, even though maybe you're thinking that you're rotating enough as you're moving your hands, if you go for a bow rudder, the only way to really get that blade all the way across and down is with some good torso rotation. You know, getting your butt to swivel in your seat or pushing around with your legs. A lot has to happen so that you can get that blade all the way on the other side. So I find it funny in my head that I spent hours and hours and hours doing and trying to work on my bow rudder, and then the CrossBow Rudder, regardless of how efficient one is versus the other, in my mind came later as a party trick, not as a useful demonstration of a way to turn. So to me, it's no mystery that if I'm out on the water and I need to pick something to turn my kayak without losing momentum, my body goes automatically to that bow rudder because I'm used to it. I put my time in. That's what has become muscle memory. I also spent a lot of time thinking, okay, well, if I'm going to do a bow rudder on this side, maybe I'll initiate on this side, then I swing around, I bring it into my bow rudder, then I'm ready for my forward stroke to then go back. So I also worked on how do I incorporate an awkward maneuver at first, until you get used to it, into a paddling scenario, where I think for a lot of other paddlers, they might have spent the equivalent amount of time with the CrossBow Rudder. And so, depending on how you learned it, I think that will also play part in how you then find some maneuvers easier or easier to reach into your toolbox and pull them out at the right time. One thing that we talk about all the time is in situations where, let's say there's currents or waves coming or whatever, we resort to whatever is easiest in our access to whatever maneuvers or motions that we learned really early on. We don't want to be thinking about, wait, what do I do again? You go right to what you remember. Your body does it automatically. So I find it easier that way, and that's why I go to the Bow Rudder, just because I've spent the most time on it, even though the CrossBow Rudder has a lot of pros. I also wanted to piggyback in one of my recent videos. I think it was the Greenland paddle one, 3 things to consider, where I talk about it doesn't matter where you are, if there's a forward stroke class, try to take it, especially if you've never taken them with different instructors. You never know what you might learn. You might pick up new things. And something similar just happened to me last year. I was at an event, and my good friend Tim was teaching a class on just Greenland paddle, strokes, maneuvers, general Greenland paddle tomfoolery, which was a lot of fun. We did a lot of different things, but it brought out something new for me that I hadn't thought about in the CrossBow Rudder. So I also wanted to link that to this conversation. And so as we were doing different strokes and stuff, he wanted for us to be able to feel comfortable swinging the blade around and moving it from side to side and being able to use it on both sides of the kayak, no matter what you were doing. And so we were working on the CrossBow Rudder for a while, and it's always great to work on stuff that you don't usually do. And this sparked something new that I hadn't noticed before, and that was, so with the Bow Rudder, I always edge away from it so that I can unlock my stern, and that allows me to have a cleaner, easier turn. But what I discovered, which I thought was very interesting, was when I do my Bow Rudder and I do my edging, I try to hold it in place because the water is trying to push this out, right? So as I open the paddle, I'm opening the door. Depending on how aggressive I am in my angle, that's going to try to turn the boat. And if I'm not holding this and I'm not keeping it steady, my paddle's going to try to go. I need to keep things strong so that it keeps it in place. And the revelation I had was it was very easy to edge away from that blade and realize that because I'm doing the CrossBow Rudder, it made it a little easier on me to not have to hold the blade in place, because it's across the body. I'm pulling on that blade, right? And I'm all of a sudden, it's not the same thing as keeping this from going out. I'm going across and it's keeping it in place for me, and I'm just holding on. As long as I have a strong paddler's box, it was keeping it in place for me. And so that was really interesting to feel the difference between muscle memory and something that is a little harder to keep in place, something that's a little easier to keep in place, but my muscle memory going to it was just not there as much. I just haven't practiced it enough. So the other thing too is I'm not as used to having my CrossBow Rudder and then going to a different stroke. There's a lot of really neat tricks that you can do to move your paddle from this position and link it to other strokes. It was very interesting to find something new that I hadn't noticed, because I decided to join in on a really great just general strokes and maneuvers class at an event. And don't get me wrong, Tim is a fantastic teacher too. And it's not like I wasn't expecting to walk away. It's just you always go into some of these classes not knowing what you're going to take away with you. This was one little nugget of information that I took away that I thought was really interesting. So I'm hopeful to push that conversation forward and also make the case that just because someone is doing one maneuver versus another doesn't mean that they don't know it or doesn't mean they haven't learned it yet. It might simply mean that they're more comfortable doing that one, not because of where they are in their learning journey, but maybe it's because of when they learned it, they've now had this amount of time with one of those maneuvers, very little time with another. So they might prefer to do one versus the other, or it might come down to flexibility. Maybe I'm lanky, long arms, I'm not flexible, but with long arms and a skinny boat, I'm able to get over to the other side and drop that blade. Let's say if my arms were shorter or I had a wider boat, I might not be able to find it so easy to clear over to the other side and drop that blade. So then this might be more accessible. So there's lots of different factors that come into this. And I think it's a really wonderful conversation to keep having and have people give their take and their views on things they've learned and things that work for them and things that might work better than others. I do want to keep it in the realm of, is it safe? Is it effective? Then let's keep doing it. If someone is modifying something to the point that it's hurting them or that they're doing something incorrectly or it's being ineffective, yes, let's fix that. Let's try to find different strokes or maneuvers that might help in that area. But if they're effective, if it works for them, let's discuss why, how, and figure out what works for everyone. So what's your take on that? Which one of the two has been easier for you? Which have you learned when? Did you learn both during the same class the first time you were shown the strokes? I would be really interested to hear. If there's any other stories, any tips you want to share, I would love for you to share them below in the comments. If there's some questions, anything further to add, please do leave a comment as well. Subscribe if you'd like. Hope this was helpful. As always, I'm Kayak Hipster. Thank you for watching. See you next time.